Hello, and welcome back to a very special episode of the podcast. I'm Melissa, and I am so excited to share this episode with you. We'll be back very soon with the rest of the Josephine Baker series. A few weeks ago, a story broke that immediately caught my interest. Back in May of this year, a dive team in Greek waters did the most remarkable thing. After years of exploratory dives and government red tape, for the first time in history, artifacts were salvaged from Titanic's sister ship Britannic. She is, for all intents and purposes, Titanic's twin, resting on her side after her sudden and tragic end. She struck a naval mine in the Aegean Sea in 1916 while she was serving as a hospital ship. If you've listened to our episode on Violet Jessup, who was on board, you'll know she was also sailing on the Olympic during its collision with the Hawk. She also survived the Titanic and Britannic's end. I always wonder if she was the luckiest or unluckiest woman in the world, but I remember she survived several catastrophes at sea on top of not being able to swim, as well as only having one working lung after battling tuberculosis as a child. So she goes into the God's favorites pile for sure. But there is so much more to Britannic than meets the eye. Her story is often overshadowed by Titanic, but there are mysteries to solve with her. In fact, when author and diver Richie Kohler started in the world of shipwrecks, he was a huge Titanic fan. But the first time he went to Britannic, his focus shifted and she became his passion. The dive, conducted with permission by the Greek Efferent and the wreckage owner, marked a monumental moment in the ship's history. Now back to me. I was so hyped when I found out the story happened that I made multiple videos on the topic, and was even more excited when one of the dive leads, Katy Kohler, showed up in my comments section. So I reached out, and I'm happy and excited to report that after our exchange, I got Katy and her husband Richie to answer some questions I had and some of your questions on this landmark dive. And it's interesting and at times intense. They dealt with organizing travel, and for a moment it looked like paperwork allowing the recovery of the artifacts would not get to them on time. But after lots of waiting, they managed to make history and salvage artifacts from Britannic to continue to tell the story of her passengers some 109 years after her untimely end. So without further ado, this is God's Favorites, a history podcast. Richie and Katy Kohler.
But what I wanted to ask, first of all, so maybe you could explain this, because we have been looking at about my friends and I, looking at different sources, different media sources. And the biggest question is just like, how did this come about? Because we were trying to figure out it starts in 2019, Simon Mills owns the wreck. Maybe you can shed some light on that for us, either one.
Well, for me, it's a decidedly different story than it is for my wife. For me, it started 20 years ago, and it started on Titanic. In 2005, I was working for the History Channel. Without going down this rabbit hole, I was given a lead. That lead brought me to my bosses working at the History Channel and said, "We've got this great story. We have to do this. You've got to do it." And they loved it. They were like, "Yes, this is great. How much is it?" We go, "Well, it's going to be about $300K to charter the ship." And they're like, "No." At the time, back in 2005, 2004, an episode of Deep Sea Detectives was about $130K was what they were paying, roughly. A little more for this, a little less for that. But they were like, it's just not there. They wanted us to score. They wanted us to come back with the Holy Grail, and they weren't willing to gamble. But you're talking to a guy who, most of my life has been about shipwrecks, and having an opportunity to go to Titanic, even if I had to bankrupt myself to do it, but not go there as a tourist. See, the key here is, can I contribute? Can we contribute? Can we do something that's going to make a difference? So we put our money on the line, went out there, got lucky, and that luck, finding these missing pieces, brought me to Britannic. And for no other reason than Britannic being shallower and in much better condition, more intact, she is a perfect scale model of Titanic. And so if you want to ask structural questions about Titanic, you're going to have to look at Britannic. The problem is, when I went there in 2006, I forgot all about Titanic, and I became obsessed with Britannic. At first, Evan and I, Evan Kovacs, my partner back then, became obsessed with one particular aspect, and that was, why did Britannic sink so quickly? You know, in light of the Titanic disaster, there was so many different changes that occurred to Britannic. She should have stayed afloat much longer, but she didn't. She sank quicker. And so, as divers, we use these skills to get inside and answer those questions. I know I'm kind of summarizing 20 years of my life, but once we finished that, we really came to grips with it in 2009. But we really, because of a problem with our camera, we had no proof. So I could tell you what we saw, but as you know, being in the media, if I can't show you, it didn't happen. So it would be 2015 and 2016, we would get back there with working cameras and be able to document what we had seen in 2009. 2016 was then the 100-year anniversary of the sinking of Britannic. Was also the time that I felt that I should write my first book about all of this, this epic adventure in my life. And working with Simon Mills and with other incredibly talented people, we knew that down the road, there would be the possibility that we could recover objects. Some people thought it would never happen. And so it has, for me, been a 20-year journey to this point. Now, for Katy, it's a little bit of not a shorter story, but a shorter journey.
So for me, I guess it actually started in 2019 when I met this guy at a dive show. And fast forward many months, we started dating, COVID happened, and suddenly the 21 expedition was ongoing, or Evan Kovacs was trying to really set up this 21 expedition. And I was at the point where I could almost dive Britannic. Like, I had the experience, I just didn't have the qualifications, but they needed a support diver. So I came in as a support diver. I sort of started the role of teen paramedic as well and instituted that. And the way things usually lay out in these types of expeditions is you start in that support role and then you get invited back once you're qualified to go into these expeditions. So 21, I was support for 2 weeks. It was miserable. Let me tell you, like, because I wasn't just diving support, which was exhausting. I was doing the Dan research. So I was helping with vital signs, and they get so mad at me, but basically, like, you have to, like, cordon off these toddlers, and you're like, no, you have to go do this. Go get
herding cats.
Yeah,
it's like herding cats.
Go get your cardiac ultrasound. Now go do it again 30 minutes later. And it's important because they also, not only did they all sign up for this guy instituted this. He's the one who reached out to Divers Alert Network to say this. And yet he was the hardest person of all.
You know, I'm the king of double dip. Ask my wife all the time, every aspect of my life. If I can bring my wife, bring my kids, bring a client, I'm a winner. I got it all. And so I'm always looking to try and get the most bang for the buck. And so in 21, we were given for the first time access to the entire shipwreck. Every other permit was very specific about where you were going, what you were doing. In this case, we were given the opportunity to go wherever we wanted with the purpose of documenting the inside to record the existing condition, to locate possible historic artifacts for recovery, and also to answer questions. Because there's still questions. Even with all the work we've done, there are still unanswered questions on Britannic.
So I think one big part of this is each group of 2 or 3 divers, you only get 30 minutes, because even if you say it's a 40-minute dive to Britannic, it's 5 to 10 minutes to get down there. And then you have the time you spend within the shipwreck, and you need an equal amount of time to get back to the line and start coming up. So yes, we put people on the wreck. Yes, we try to maximize our time, but you don't get a lot of time to do this. And wherever the line is, it is. And you could be like, well, I want to be like 30 minutes that way, and you're out of luck.
You know, one of the best analogies I've ever heard about trying to locate things underwater is imagine you're in your living room and you're looking for your keys. Okay, now shut off the light, close one eye, and look through a tube, and now find your keys. That's how limited you are. You've only got so much vision, so much scope, so much time, and you're trying to get as much done as possible. And I think that despite that, we have had hundreds of man hours since 21 on the wreck, knock wood, without any major incident. I mean, we've had some camera issues, we've had minor stuff.
No one's gotten injured.
Exactly. And that's
Things
the
have
most
happened, but no one's gotten injured.
exactly most important thing. So, you know, at the big question is to let's say my family or someone, it's like, what does it mean? Why? There's no treasure. Why are you doing this? Why are you risking your life? Why are you and your beautiful wife, you know, at great expense? By the way, I don't know if Katie told you, we're not funded. Nobody's paying us. Our entire team paid for all of this. You know, in the course of my career, absolutely, I've worked for television. I have absolutely been paid for certain dives, and I've even had a few expeditions that were covered by media. But not the work we've done in 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 has totally been solely self-funded.
It was love. You pay for it. I mean, you have to pay for it with your own money, but you do it because you want to be a part of it. I get that completely.
It's also that crazy obsessive love too.
Yeah,
You
no,
know?
here, yeah,
No,
I
it's
mean,
not that same. Yeah, well, you're on the
I'm right
same.
there with you.
But to cycle back to the original question, so 21, they get this carte blanche permit, and they knock it out of the park. 22, no permit. We do exterior operations. 20,
We were given the permission to dive the wreck, but do photogrammetry from the
Yes.
outside, which is you know, when you're looking at it
So-
from an archaeological standpoint, it's all.
he's saying we got permission, but we were the very first trip to run on the Britannic once the national park opened. So we were allowed to go do this, yes, but we were the very first people that would have been globally allowed to do this regardless of permit. 23, again, carte blanche. 24, carte blanche, but the weather said otherwise. So we ended up diving a cave in Athens. And then suddenly we said, hey, because we got blown out of this expedition in 24, can we have this permit again in 25? And they said, no. Simon Mills said, no, we're going for the recovery. At which point everyone was like, oh, say no more. Stop there, say less. And we now, mind you, he's coming from America. I'm coming from the Philippines, and Evan is still in the Philippines. So I don't think you talk to him at this point.
No.
Richie says to me, Katie, don't say anything to the team. And I was like, don't say what? And he's like, we don't have the permit. I'm like,
The physical paperwork wasn't there, and the operator, as you get the Greek national that our operator that we work with is like, you're not touching anything or bringing anything up because I'll go to jail, because he's facilitating this. So without physical paper in his hands saying we can do this, and I'm like,
and we all
I'm
arrived-
telling you, don't tell anybody because they're not going to come.
And we're being told you need to delay this until October, and we're like, this is an international team arriving in Athens today.
Of everybody paying their own. And again, it's not about the money, but it is about the money because
It is.
we're all blue collar guys and gals working here trying to make make this happen.
Yeah. So we arrive, and I'm zipping my mouth shut. I'm like, luckily I'm the safety officer, and from the safety aspect, this is not my business.
No.
Thank God. This was not my position.
But as operations, I am, and it falls totally on my squarely on my shoulders.
And you got delayed, so you had time to think about it.
Yeah.
That was great. So even Simon was sitting there like, no, Greek effort, we love you, but this team is coming internationally, and they're arriving now. And part of the reason it was delayed is usually there's a meeting once a month, but it was Greek Easter. And we were all arrived 1 week after Greek Easter, so the meeting got delayed, and it led to a lot
all
of
I can say is that bureaucracy is, you know, different in Greece. That's the best I can say. And
let's be honest, it's the same everywhere. The same
No,
everywhere.
Well,
there's a
there's like
special
the
level.
barriers too in different practices, and thus you have to go through. I lived in France for a bit, and some of the like paperwork, it was an office here, take another paper somewhere else, so I kind of get it, and that is intense. And so, what was it like when you finally found out you were getting the paper? How long
It
did
took
that?
days. It took days.
Yeah,
I mean, we were already diving
we
by
were
the time
we
got
were already
approved.
diving. We were setting up dives. We hadn't, of course, touched anything, but we had set the down line on the wreck. The team had already done a checkout dive.
We did we did photogrammetry of the bell. We haven't published some of these photos yet, which we're allowed to. We're just waiting. Of the lantern locker. So we already did external exploratory dives. So we were set. We knew the minute our archaeology team, who was angels,
Yeah,
once they arrived on island, we knew that we were good to go because we had already been told as soon as they get there. Unfortunately, this was now like day after day, weather, ferry schedule, like, are they going to get here when we're here?
Well,
And it worked out.
it did work out. They were a few days, just a couple of days late that we were able to use for other purposes. But in a long story short, I would think that in hindsight, our team performed admirably. We did not miss an opportunity. As a matter of fact, I can't take credit for the success of the team. And in that, it's because even though I was trying to direct what we're going to recover, there was times my team came back to me going, no, Richie, we should do this, this, and this. And then I've got 2 or 3 of them coming at me and going, we should do this. And I'm like, I don't know, guys. And then, sometimes you got to listen, and it's not rank and file. We're all equals. But my point is that you have to have a chain of command. There has to be the buck stops here. And so ultimately, sinks or swim, it's going to fall on my shoulders, on Evan's shoulders. Heaven forbid something goes wrong. It's going to fall on her shoulders for letting something. So my point is that there's got to be accountability. But my point is that with excellent people, they saw things I didn't see. They had insight that I was not aware of. And because of that, we outperformed even my own expectations.
So how did you decide? I'm sure it's a process. You said that people would see something that was more accessible, but in the initial listings of like the crow's nest bell or the port navigational land, how did you pick out exactly what looked the
Can I
best
show you?
things? Oh,
So Simon, so mind you, there was issues. The entire team's waiting for this book. We all say we paid into this project, Simon, you bring us this book. We are not paying for it. And the archaeologist showed up with the book and they're flipping through like a catalog,
like a Sears
like a Sears
catalog.
catalog.
They literally had, I'm not even kidding, they had little post-it notes on what our photographs in Simon's book.
They're like, we want this. We want 2 of these.
Yep.
1 of this. If you could bring up this, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, how about this one right here?
So they went shopping in this book, and then we went diving, and
we're the reason.
And
we're the reason for the book.
We're the ones who took the
You took the pictures and you provided the catalog and they went shopping. It's perfect.
It's important to say. It's so important to say. The one thing that the team that we are on did not locate was the bell. The bell was located in 2019 by Joe Maserani and Ricky Simon, who are a New Jersey-based team. They went on an expedition with some British, including Rick Ayrton, and they're the ones who found that bell.
They were not part of any salvage operation. They were a sport diving team just visiting the wreck, and
Permitted sports.
a permitted sports diving team, and they located the bell. They told Simon about it, and then from that moment on, Simon was even more anxious to recover. The reality is that although the bell being the iconic voice of a ship and being in many ways a symbol, I don't think it's the most significant artifact of a ship. I think sometimes the more day-to-day things like the binoculars that Katie found is something that's so tangible and such a day-to-day object. Even the crockery, which is really nice, and don't get me wrong, I like it. I think it all tells a story, and I don't think that one object can encompass that. So if all we ever got was the bell, yeah, okay, beat your chest, you got the bell. But I think what's more important is the team has approached this ship with the help of the archaeological team from the Everett to provide a bigger picture of life aboard this ship. One of the things that was important to Krisa, Krisa, was, believe it or not, we call them bean pots. It's just a ceramic pot that you would put food in. It doesn't have any writing on it. It's just a generic pot. It's like Tupperware. It's like 1916 Tupperware. But the thing about this for her was that she had been working off of different sites and had seen these broken remnants.
Including Antikythera.
Including Antikythera, but mostly off the Dardanelles, where you have to realize that, Mudros, in Mudros, where Britannic was working, picking up wounded soldiers. So when they would get done, whether it was pickles, who knows what were in these jars, they'd throw them overboard. And she's diving in Mudros and she's seeing these broken pots. And then here in Britannic are these intact pots. And she wanted them. She literally said, I want one of these pots. And it doesn't say White Star. It is the most obscure. It is no different than this cup. It's just a very generic thing. But to her, it meant the world. And I think that's the part of it that's important, is that it tells part of the human story.
I always appreciated it too. And I wanted to tell you, Katie, the binoculars are actually my favorite because one of the things my favorite story, I actually have, this is funny, on my desk here. This is a copy of the keys to Titanic's binocular cabinet that Davy Blair had. I have these on my desk. So anytime I see a binocular related to that, I'm always like, glad they know where those were. But yeah, was there anything that you didn't get that you could see wanting in future dives?
The Marconi.
Wait.
Oh, that was like, let's.
How much time do we have?
Yeah, I've got a pro plan. You can go as long as you want.
Go ahead.
So I'm one of 3 human beings that has been in the Turkish bath since the sinking. You have 2 of the 3. Richie and Evan found it in 23. I went with Evan to recover in 25. And
the tiles,
we want
beautiful.
We want so badly. You're in there and it's a waterfall of silt. So you don't have visibility. You don't know what you're picking up. You just know you're picking something up that's looks like a tile. And by look, I mean feels like a tile. She's like, well, that'll do. We really want to get some of the ornamental tiles. In addition to the Turkish, and in addition to the Marconi, I would really love to go back and get ornamental tiles.
And again, because it's a direct correlation to Titanic, you can see those tiles. They're nearly identical to the ones that are 2.5 miles down inside the Turkish bath on Titanic. And one of the things that Katie was alluding to was that these were loose. And one of the things that I need to explain to you is that we were given a mandate by the Everett that we were not, absolutely not, to remove anything that was affixed to the wreck. We're not to use crowbars or hammers. We're not to unbolt or unscrew. So if it's loose and laying down, if it's fallen, yes, we can pick it up. But we're not to do anything that can impact the shipwreck in any way. So things like the Maker's Plate, which we have located, that say Harlan and Wolf, Belfast, that's firmly affixed to a center column. It bolted into the steel. And we did ask, and the ship's owner, Simon Mills, was really hoping that we could go get it. And the lead archaeologist, Dimitri, said, absolutely not. Dionysus said, absolutely not. You're not to unscrew or use any tools. If you can't pick it up, then you're not to take it. So, that may change. But right now we're operating within the parameters that the boss, and to be honest with you, we have many bosses. We have the little boss, which is Simon, and then we got the big boss,
The
which
effort.
is the effort. Yeah, exactly. Because Simon can't put us in jail, but the effort could.
He might. I
Sorry,
was
like,
thinking, Marconi. I did a lot of content for RMS Titanic Inc. on the dive, and the big question was Marconi. And of course, it's looking like a no now. They won everything. There's all this controversy over that, but they had won a court case to get it out, and we're like, nah, it doesn't look like that's going to happen now. Do you think the effort could be persuaded on some of these things if they think the wreck is? I mean, I know it's in better, pristine condition.
I am at liberty to tell you that we are returning and we have been mandated to recover other objects. Those objects, I'm not at liberty to tell you what they are, but the Marconi could or could not be on that list.
but
So
what we
Oh.
can add to that is that it is also team discretion, which means
Safety first.
if we don't feel like we could either safely recover it and or recover it keeping its integrity in
Yeah.
shape, then we are not to recover it.
One of the major, and this was an operational question that I had with my guys, which was um, there's things that we can do as sport divers that we shouldn't do when we're working as archaeological recovery divers. And what I mean by that is we can't take a risk. We never want to hand an archaeologist something that we broke under any circumstance. And that is unforgivable. It survived all these years in the shipwreck, and then the naysayers would have our guts for garters because they'd be right. Look, it was fine until you touched it. So we had to operate in such a way so that we could hold our head up high and go, we brought everything up in as good or better condition than we found it. And so that's really super important.
And that's usually a team decision. So you go into this with an idea. So the team knew what our highlights were. We knew that what the effort wanted going in. It got amplified once they arrived, but everyone knew for months. So we all had these general ideas of how to do this safely and effectively. And finally, we all came together and said, there's certain artifacts that can't be lifted right now because we don't have the manpower topside. We don't have
safely get them in a boat.
We don't have equipment needed at depth. Not that we can't go buy it, but it hasn't been fabricated yet. We need more information before we can move anything.
Yeah. Things like the ship's telegraphs, which are the devices that say full ahead, stop, that communicate between the bridge and the engine room. Those are things that have the glass space still intact. You can still read it. Those are beautiful, but they're also quite fragile. The brass is heavy, but inside that glass is so fragile. It would just take the wrong bang
And we're working off of ribs. So you're not working off of a winch that would lift it up well clear of the side. You're dragging across the side of the boat to get it in.
And the proper way would be the way that Katy did the binoculars, the way that some of the crockery came up, which was it was wrapped up and protected on the bottom so that it could handle the jostling of retrieval.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when the heavier the object, like these telegraphs, which can weigh in excess of 100, 150, 200 pounds, you have to think about it. The bell weighs over 150 pounds. We wrapped that thing up like a baby in swaddling in a huge canvas bag and then wrapped it with straps. And that's a big brass bell. And they were elated. The way that we protected it, the way that it got to them, all of those shells were not broken. To them, maintaining the concretion, the growth on the outside was proof that we, as sport divers, could execute these archaeological recoveries from depth, which, by the way, this was the deepest diver-operated recovery of artifacts in Greek waters in their history. There may have been objects recovered by submarine deeper, but never by divers. We are the ones that have done it and did successfully, and we've been applauded because their archaeological team do not dive to the depths that we do.
But as much as we say we gave it to them, the archaeological team was on these boats, they were in equal measure pulling up these artifacts that we were giving them. And then, good God, I'm sure Lisa was at the police station at 2 a.m. with a little tiny scalpel, shaving off these oyster shells from the bell. So it wasn't it wasn't just the divers, it was a full team effort here.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, was this your first dive too? I mean, no, it wasn't this was your second dive, third dive? I'm losing track here.
So my first dive to Britannic, so I was the first American female to dive her in 2022.
2022. Okay. And the first time you saw her, because I know you have this, I'm actually like halfway through your book right now, trying to like read. I'm in that Cousteau section, but I was like, okay. But so when you saw her, what were your thoughts? Because I know he loves this boat.
He loves her. He
He
loves
loves
her.
her. I know.
So what I like when I give presentations, what I like to tell people is my first dive to Britannic was that year it was the only dive I made because of the weather. And you get to Greece, you get to Kia, and they put a line down. And because of currents and weather and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it's never that you're pulling yourself down 400 feet. You're pulling yourself down 600 to 800 feet, almost horizontally at times. So you spend like the first 200+ feet really excited. You spend the next third of the dive really regretting your life choices, and you're like, what am I getting myself in? Like, what the hell's going on here? I'm really tired. I'm hungry and I'm cold, and this really sucks. I'm not into this anymore. And then all of a sudden everything's just kind of black, because that year and mind you, the shop owner is fantastic where he is able to drop the line, but this year the line dropped in the sand, so you're going directly to 400 feet. And suddenly I look up and I'm like, it's not black, I'm in her shadow. And it's just a
The
mess.
sun was on.
It is a mess.
So to illuminate, no pun intended, Katie's story, Britannic stands on her side, or lays on her side, but she's 100 feet off the seafloor. So that's a 10-story building that's 1,000 feet long. Okay. And so most of the time, the boat captains land the shot or the anchor on top of the ship at about 300 feet. So when you're coming down, you're in blue water, and then all of a sudden, bang, you see this beautiful ocean liner laid out in front of you. But on Katie's dive, the shot had landed in the sand, and we were coming from an angle far away from the ship. So she's swimming in blue water, blue water, blue water, no shipwreck, blue water. She's looking, it's 300 feet, no shipwreck, no bottom. And then all of a sudden it starts to get dark because she's in the shadow. The sun was on the other side of Britannic. And you don't realize that at the time until you get to the seafloor, and then you look up and you realize you're looking at the shadow of the ship. And as you swim closer to it, you just become in awe. I mean, there's not a dive. Every single dive that I've done, and to this day, I still am in awe. And when I'm leaving and it's time to go up, as I'm going up, I just keep looking at her, and I keep looking at her. And then all of a sudden there's this moment that she just fades to gray and she's gone, and you're in the blue water, and you're sad, but you got to come up, but you want to just stay there looking at it because it is the most incredibly impressive. If you like shipwrecks.
Yeah, I love shipwrecks.
Well, if you like shipwrecks, it is incredible. And if you like Titanic, because when you look at her, that's what you see.
But we did decide after the 22 expedition that Richie would not be the DJ in any vehicle ride or anything, because we kept getting blown out day after day. We extended our 2-week trip to make this one dive, and the entire time he kept playing that song, and I don't remember the name of it, but I hope you still feel small when you stand beside the ocean. And suddenly there I am 2 weeks in, I'm on this dive, and that's all that's going through my head. And I'm like, I am going to kill you.
Oh, no. I love doing that. Like if we're about to go diving, I'll like do a show tune or something. I'll say it Right before you go, and like, here's a story of a lovely lady, and then you push her
So
over and the whole dive, she'll just hear that song from the Brady Bunch in her head. She'll be like, I hate it.
yeah, now I start.
Like waterproof AirPods next time, maybe.
Honestly, there's now cases for the phones where I'm like, can someone bring this down to me so I can watch a movie and completely ignore my husband for the next 3 hours? That'd be great.
And
That's
then they're going on display. And where's it?
Boreas.
Thank you.
Right.
Furious. Yeah,
So
I had the press release. I was like, oh yeah.
So they're still in, and we've gotten a couple updates about them. They're still in that conservation factor, but the museum's still being built. So that they're not being released because the museum is probably going to take longer than it is to preserve the artifacts.
So a lot of them, whether it's brass or crockery, have to be desalinated, and that process cannot be rushed. Basically, it's just immersion in fresh water so that by osmosis, the salt will come out of the crockery. If you don't do that, then the glaze on the crockery will break. Even clear glassware will get a haze on it. And in brass, we call it brass disease. It gets green. I'm sure you've seen brass.
It's like copper.
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. So the immersion in fresh water with constant changing to get the salts out is an important part of it. And then the degree of conservation or restoration is really going to be up to the effort. There are some objects. We recently were obviously in Athens on a blowout, and we went to the National Museum, and we saw some of the objects that have been recovered off Antikythera. Some of them they've restored to pristine, and then others they've left half with the barnacles and the incrustation on it, so that you realize what immersion over the millennia has done to these things. So I think we're going to be just as surprised as everybody else to see what level of restoration they do.
We are excited.
Yeah,
The
very
whole,
much.
The whole team is really excited.
I've never been to Greece. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to go though, because I'm like, okay, when's it opening? But we're still building the
Well,
museum.
we're planning on attending the
Yes.
grand opening too, hopefully.
Yeah, send me a message and I'll show up because
100%.
I figured it out. But yeah, anything else you can think of before I let you guys go and you can have like a full meal now instead of just.
Oh no, we already ate dinner. And the boys are cleaning up. The funny thing about shipwrecks, and I'll let my wife have the last word.
Never happens.
The funny thing about shipwrecks is I think for me, they're stories of people. They're stories of drama, of tragedy, of pathos. And I think Britannic has, because of her lineage, because she was the last sister, because she's overshadowed by the tragedy that is Titanic, she doesn't have her story. And in a good way, because she didn't, or, heaven forbid, history being that she had went to Mudros first and then hit the mine, she would have overshadowed the tragedy of Titanic by twofold. If there had been 3,000 wounded soldiers on board, the death toll would have been horrific. So there's a bright lining in that. And so there's so many stories that most people will never know. To the casual Titaniac or person who's really interested in Titanic and the Olympians, they know the story of Violet Jessup, but they don't really know the stories of all of the firemen and the fact that, although she had British naval officers for crew, the majority of the rank and file crew were all from Ireland. And many of them were friends and neighbors and cousins and brothers that were working, civilians working on a now military hospital ship. Now, that doesn't make it a target, mind you, but still. And so when you have a civilian crew and a military command structure, just kind of think about that dynamic and how it would work in any other situation. So that's the human story of Britannic that I think is never really looked at.
It honestly goes even further than that, which parallels another project that I have worked on a non-shipwreck wreckage site, where it's as much a part of the community where it sank. So it parallels my other expedition where something sank within eyesight of this island or landmass, and it draws those residents into this story. So it's not just the story of the Royal Navy, not just the story of Violet Jessup, but it's now the story of the Greek people as well because of what they did to contribute to saving all of those lives. And that's in equal measures a story that has to be shared, and something that they should have a lot of pride in nationally is they saved a lot of people that day.
I've seen that photo of the survivors after, and I was like, oh, I love that. So yeah, you do think about the ties like Cove Island and these places that have ties to Titanic that get to tell part of that story, and now the Greeks get to tell Britannic story, and now they have artifacts to do it, and that's so incredible. So thank you guys so much. If you think of anything else, let me know, and yeah, I'll just keep me posted because like I will show up. I've done crazier things. I've gone to Europe for fun, so yeah, just keep me posted when it's opening, and I will be there.
We can't wait to see you there.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much for talking to me, guys. I'll reach out and send you the link to the episode.
Thank you, Richie and Katy, for taking the time to talk about your passions, and I cannot wait to see the next chapter of this story. Wow, if you had seen the video of the podcast, you would have seen the way I shot out of my chair when Katy said my sleeper agent trigger word, Marconi. If you followed my channel or the podcast for a while, you know the way I've been rooting for the removal of Titanic's Marconi. It's one of my favorite topics, and if we can't get her out, I'm here for salvaging Britannics. Richie has written a book called Mystery of the Last Olympian. It's very, very good. I'm almost done with it, and it has great pictures, so I'm going to put a link in the description for you guys to buy it. I highly urge you to do so. So, what do we think, friends? Vacay to Greece once the items go on display? God, I love the fact that Greece has British artifacts on display for a change. How the tables turn, or turntables if you're an Office fan. Thank you so much to everyone who supports our Patreon to help with streaming costs, research, and music licenses, especially since TikTok has booted me out of the creator rewards program for ambiguous reasons I don't quite understand. Believe me, I was going to lose my mind until I realized this is happening to a lot of people right now. And if you sign up for the $10 tier on Patreon, I will send you a sticker and a thank you note. And a special thank you for everyone who helped me purchase that portable studio. Oh, it's going to sound so much better than the closet. Anyway, we'll be back with the next installment in the Josephine Baker series. And as always, see you next time, friends.